much. Let's talk about the Democrats. Joining me now, CNN political commentator and Bernie Sanders supporter Bill Press, and CNN political commentator, foreign policy director for Hillary Clinton's 2008 presidential campaign, and current Hillary Clinton supporter. It's a mouthful, Neera Tanden. Neera Tanden. So, Bill, let me start with you. You heard Hillary Clinton simplify the argument, quote, "I'm not a single-issue candidate, and I don't believe we live in a single-issue country." A clear shot at Sanders. Your thoughts?
It's also a clear talking point of the Clinton campaign. Let's be honest. I heard it about 5 times last night from people who were speaking on behalf of Senator Clinton. And it's simply not true. I mean, Hillary's a great candidate, and she knows a lot about the issues. Bernie Sanders is a great candidate. And what they mean is that when they say that, all Bernie talks about is Wall Street. Again, Jake, not true. Bernie does talk about Wall Street, very tough. He also talks about education, free community college. He talks about universal health care. He talks about reforming police departments. He talks about sentencing reform. He talks about cleaning up the campaign contribution system, a whole range of candidates, of issues rather, on which some of them, the two candidates agree, and some that they don't. So it's just a bogus talking point.
Neera, I want to give you an opportunity to respond to a criticism that we've heard on CNN, which has to do with the fact that Hillary Clinton, when she pitches herself to voters, she's pitching herself because of her readiness, because of her experience. But the question then becomes, is she talking about herself too much versus the voters? I and me versus we and us. And we actually did an analysis, and we looked at how many times on the New Hampshire speeches the two candidates used I and me versus we or us. And you can see Bernie Sanders used we or us twice as much as he said I or me. And Hillary Clinton was the exact opposite. I or me 44 times versus 21 we or us. And this is just one set of speeches. Yeah. This is not a comprehensive analysis. And the reason is obviously because of her pitch about her experience. But is that a problem, do you think?
Well, I mean, in this context, I have to say we generally look at women and how they're talking about some of these issues a little differently. When you look at the Republican candidates, they're often talking about I, me, because you're talking about what you're going to do as president. But I hear the point that this really needs to be a mission about what she's going to do as president, and she has to work on making sure everyone feels part of that, and her language can shift a little bit on that point. But I think, you know, I always get a little anxious about these kinds of comparisons because, you know, we ask questions about women about whether they're talking about themselves too much. Last night, Senator Sanders kind of called her on saying, you know, when she said, you know, as president, I'll do, he called her on that, and I thought in a kind of harsh way. And really what she was saying was what all Republican male candidates, all male candidates say that all the time. Well, when I'm president, I'll do this.
This is a direct comparison with Bernie Sanders, but certainly she would stack up well with some of the other Republicans, I'm sure, especially Mr. Trump. But Bill, how about that? Neera brought up a moment that I think a lot of commentators think was not a great moment for Bernie Sanders, his "you're not president yet," Secretary Clinton. Did you think that was a little rough? Maybe the race is getting to him a little bit?
No, I'll be honest. First of all, when she said, I forget exactly how she phrased it, when I'm in the White House or something, and I thought, you know, maybe she should have said, if I'm lucky enough to get there. And I think Bernie was a little sassy on Bernie's part, and on reflection, he probably wishes he hadn't said it. It reminded me, and I'm sure a lot of us, of then Barack Obama when he said, you're likable enough, Hillary. And, you know, that hurt him, but at the same time, yeah, you do. That hurt him, but at the same time, he was elected president. So not a fatal mistake, but unfortunate remark, I'd say.
Neera, a strong performance for Secretary Clinton last night, do you think? Is it? I mean, obviously you're a fan, but
yeah, I mean, I'm biased, right? So I do think she did I think there was a strong performance. I think they were both pretty strong. I do think that the real issue in this race going forward is, you know, Senator Sanders.
Whoops.
Oh my Lord.
Whoops.
Senator Sanders. I saw this talk about it.
Yeah, flashback.
Senator Sanders has a strong critique. He does talk about a different set of issues, education, other issues, but the real strong critique he has is around inequality. And I think the debate going forward, we want to talk about rising inequality, but also other challenges the country faces. I think Hillary did a great job in saying that we have issues of systemic inequality that affects us on race, racial inequality, gender inequality, and really having a conversation about all these issues is vital as we go into South Carolina and the rest of the country.
Neera Tanden, Bill Press, to be continued. Thanks so much. Appreciate it, both of you.
All right.